Hello, everybody. Today, iCanfield Vietnam is very pleased to welcome Ms. Halston A Chavez, an associate attorney at the Galati law firm in Pennsylvania. So she specializes in U.S. immigration law with a strong focus on EB-5 investor visas, family-based immigration, and related legal matters. So thank you, Ms. Halston A Chavez, for joining us today. So
Thank you.
in our discussion, we're going to be taking a very close look at the EB-5 program,
Sure.
especially the upcoming RIA 2026. So let's start with the EB-5 RIA 2026. So from a legal perspective, how do you see this milestone impacting EB-5 investment decisions today?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think there's three big dates that people need to be aware of right now that are affecting the EB-5 world. The first one, of course, is the grandfathering deadline, which is on September 30th, 2026. And that deadline is written into the law, and it says that for any petitions filed before that deadline, then they will be protected, or they will be grandfathered into the law as we know it today. And then on January 1st, 2027, we know that the minimum investment amount is going to be increased in connection with inflation. So we don't know the exact amount that it will be, but we do know that the law says on January 1st, 2027, the minimum investment amounts will be increased. And then the third deadline is September 30th, 2027, which is the date that the EB-5 program is authorized until. So with these three deadlines in mind, investors are, the way that I'm seeing the deadlines impact investors' decisions is that they feel a bit of pressure to file soon. And I think it's extremely important that investors start to find the team that they're going to work with, start to look at the projects that they're going to want to look into and to choose, and start to prepare their source of funds, because the first deadline is September 30th, and that's going to come really quickly. So I think all of these different nuances are starting to put pressure on investors to make sure that they start to get their ducks in a row sooner than later.
Okay, so currently there are a lot of things happening in the world in terms of war, politics, and economics. So given the current uncertainties, so how do you think these factors are shaping the immigration demand and the U.S. approach to investor immigration?
That's a great question. And I think that each investor is going to view that situation a little bit differently. And I think each investor is going to feel a different way. I think in general, we are still seeing very high demand, even with everything going on in the world. But of course, I think everything going on is going to bring a little bit more uncertainty about the future. So there's a lot of uncertainty going on. And I think it's important that even amongst that uncertainty, investors start to try to work towards filing their petition and getting their team together, so that if they decide to move forward, when maybe their uncertainties are not as strong, then they're ready to do that. So I think that it depends on the investor on how comfortable they are right now with immigration, with everything going on, but we also don't know how long things will continue to go on for, and if they'll finish. So it's important for investors to start to plan now, even if they're not ready to immigrate now.
Okay, I see. So from your experience handling EB-5 cases, what are some of the most common misunderstandings that investors have, particularly when it comes to legal compliance and source of funds?
Sure. So a lot of investors think that, if I have $1 million sitting in my bank account, then all I have to show is my latest bank statement and prove that I have the net worth that is required in order to do EB-5. But the law actually requires that we show exactly the entire source and path of funds all the way to the project's bank account. And so that means submitting bank statements, that means submitting tax returns. It's a lot of documentation, and a lot of investors think that it's a lot more easy than that, and that it will take a lot less time than it will. So again, we were talking about the grandfathering deadline earlier. That's why it's important to start early, because source of funds actually does take a very long time to put together. I would say another misconception is that, for example, one of the most common source of funds that we see with Vietnamese investors is selling property. The market's booming here, and so people are able to sell their properties that they bought a long time ago for a lesser amount of money for more money now. And a lot of investors think that all they have to do is show the sale document and show the funds coming in. But again, what's required is that we show how they initially purchased the property in the first place. And so, for example, if they purchased the property initially with salary, we have to show proof of their salary and proof of their employment and how they were able to purchase the property in the first place and then ultimately sell that property. So again, just keeping in mind that it goes back further than you think. We really need to show the actual initial source all the way through the path of funds to the project entity.
It's really useful information for the investors.
For sure.
So last question, if you could give one piece of advice for the investors, so what would it be?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the truth is that my number one piece of advice is to start now. There's a lot of uncertainty coming in the future. As things are today, we know what the program looks like today. We know how it's been operating. We know what the law is. But after September 30th, 2026, nobody, not one person you talk to, unless you have somebody on the inside in the US government, nobody knows, right, what's going to happen after September 30th, 2026. And so what we do know is today, and so starting early is extremely important, and starting to think about your future.
Start today.
Yes,
So
start
it's a
today.
valuable piece of advice. So thank you, Ms. Halston A Chavez, for joining us today and sharing your insights about the EB5 program. So
Thank you.
we look forward to seeing you again in the next videos of us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.